So a few years ago, when he was just a city councillor, Toronto Mayor Rob Ford sent out a letter trying to raise donations for a registered charity for kids' sports. That's sort of Ford's thing. He loves football and coaching and basically doing normal human things. But the trouble is he sent out the charity letter on Toronto City Hall stationery, which he shouldn't have done because it wasn't official city business. So basically he used the wrong paper. I mean, no big whoop. It was a few years ago. It was a small thing. The letter raised $3,150. I say again, it was for a kid's charity, not for his own pocket. The mayor's independently wealthy anyway. And that's the story. But then Rob Ford went and did something that just couldn't stand. He ran for mayor, and he beat the anointed Liberal. See, George Smitherman was supposed to win that election. He was a former Liberal Party cabinet minister. He was meticulously politically correct. He was a gay activist. He was a radical environmentalist, etc., etc. So naturally, the Toronto Star and the CBC and the rest of Toronto's downtown Liberal elites loved Smitherman. And they couldn't laugh hard enough at Ford. I mean, look at the guy. He's fat. His face is red. His suits don't fit. He looks goofy, and he's so damn middle class. I mean, who the hell would coach kids football and shop at Tip Top Tailors instead of going to the latest art gallery opening and enjoying tofu hors d'oeuvres while sipping on a fair trade organic Chardonnay? I mean, for aesthetic reasons alone, Ford had to lose, or else Toronto's status as the coolest city in Canada would be in jeopardy. If you think I'm exaggerating, then you didn't read the Globe and Mail's major op-ed on the election a couple years ago written by Stephen Marsh. I mean, if we're going to judge people on appearances, just look at Marsh. I mean, who poses like that for a photo? I mean, not Rob Ford, because Ford's not that cool. So let me quote you Marsh's column about Ford in the days before the last Toronto election. I swear on a stack of Korans, this is not a spoof. He really wrote this, and the Globe really published it. It's a bit long, but I just want you to see what the thing was like. Here's Stephen Marsh's piece in the Globe and Mail. Quote, "The mounds of fat that encircle Rob Ford's body like great deflated tires of defeat are truly unprecedented in Canadian politics. We have had chunky political candidates before, but the front runner in Toronto's current contest to be mayor is so fat that his belly is invariably the first thing you notice about him. Yet far from harming his political image, his bulk is the key to his appeal. Neither intelligent nor sympathetic, Mr. Ford offers voters fat. Let no one confuse Rob Ford's obesity with jollity. Every extra pound on Mr. Ford's frame is an extra pound of rage. His angry fat is perfectly of our time. His fat is all he has going for him. Mr. Ford's body reflects the decline around us better than any story could tell." Seriously, seriously. It goes on like that. The Globe and Mail and the absolutely fabulous Stephen Marsh called Rob Ford fat literally 17 times in that article. I mean, come on, what a loser. He's fat, right? He's so fat. Yeah, and he crushed the thin candidate, George Smitherman, in the election. He crushed all of them. Ford beat Smitherman and the third place guy combined, even though Marsh and the Globe and Mail and the CBC and the Toronto Star and all the cool kids, the mean girls, disparaged Ford as fat and ugly and not cool. I mean, look at this map. Look at that map. It's true that Ford lost in the fancy pants neighborhoods downtown. Toronto, the Annex, University, Rosedale, the cool condos near the CBC, the places where hipsters bike to work, where folks sit around all day in Starbucks texting each other on their iPhones about how Toronto needs more bicycle lanes. Yeah, Ford lost the downtown Liberal elites. That's the red area there, the Stephen Marshes. But he absolutely crushed it with severely normal Torontonians, those in the suburbs, those who work hard, entrepreneurs, property owners, not renters, and importantly, immigrants. The most pro-Ford areas on that map were some of the most ethnic areas in town. How about that? I guess lean and sexy Stephen Marsh doesn't speak for a typical guy working 18 hours a day driving a cab or running a convenience store. Those people seem to prefer someone who, well, is a bit like them, maybe fat, but that's not why Ford won. He didn't win because he's fat. He won because he promised to end the fat, the gravy train at City Hall. The union feather bedding, the endless bureaucracy, the ratcheted up taxes. In 2 short years since being elected, Ford has scrapped the vehicle tax. He started ripping out those traffic jamming bike lanes. He is trimming City Hall political budgets. He privatized garbage pickup to non-union pros. And amazingly, he got the city into a massive surplus, not a deficit. That's why Toronto voted for him. Because even though he's fat and spends time coaching kids, loser, he's a better mayor than his fancy pants, the class of political elites who despise him. That fancy class couldn't beat him at the polls. He crushed them by almost 100,000 vote margin, despite their outspending him and millions of dollars worth of free ads in the media party. Well, if they couldn't get 1 million Torontonians to block Ford, maybe the Liberal elites could get just one judge to do so. Enter Clayton Ruby, the well-known left-wing lawyer. Ruby and citizen activist Paul Magder sued Rob Ford under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Rob Ford should not have sent that letter on the wrong stationery, they said, and he shouldn't have talked about that letter in City Council. Now, this was all years ago, remember? It was a trifle. I mean, no one has ever accused the mayor of doing anything for personal gain. But you see, this is about lawfare, about using nuisance lawsuits as political weapons. At the very least, bombarding Rob Ford with lawsuits will take up his time and money and distract him from work. Mission accomplished for Toronto's left, for the urban elite white liberals who hate the fact that immigrant Toronto loves their hard-working fatty. Or at the very most, these lawyers could actually have a judicial coup d'etat. Yeah, seriously, they could actually knock a mayor out of his chair for using the wrong stationery and then daring to be stubborn about it. And so it happened today. A judge from Ottawa, ruled that the Toronto mayor was in a conflict of interest, so he's fired? Poof. It's a lot easier than actually beating the guy in an election, isn't it? Now, to be clear, this judge did not find that Ford profited personally in any way. Let me quote from the judge's decision today. Quote, I recognize that the circumstances of this case demonstrate that there was absolutely no issue of corruption or pecuniary gain on the respondent's part. That's the mayor. His contraventions of the municipal code of conduct involved a modest amount of money, which he endeavored to raise for a legitimate charity, his football foundation, which is administered at arm's length through the Community Foundation of Toronto. You see, the problem, according to the judge, was that when Ford was called out on this subject after it happened, he wasn't sufficiently remorseful. He actually talked about his actions and voted, along with most of City Council, that what he did was a trifle irrelevant. Now, the law says that courts can give as little as a, quote, reprimand for something as trivial as using the wrong stationery for a charity and being stubborn about it. But the judge was incensed that Ford was not contrite and did not apologize and voted to exonerate himself. So, poof, the judge vacated Ford's seat. Translation, he fired him. No election, no campaign, just a lawsuit from a left-wing activist. Really? Well, isn't that interesting? You see, right now, as we speak, the mayor of London, Ontario, is facing 4 criminal charges laid by real police in relation to siphoning off taxpayers' money to pay for his kid's wedding. Now, Joe Fontana won't step down. He's still the mayor, though he actually hasn't denied the facts reported about him and that money. But you see, he's a liberal, former Liberal MP, so no problem, no problem. Jean Chrétien and a raft of other Liberal cabinet ministers presided over $250 million of taxpayers' money being siphoned off to ad agencies through the sponsorship scandal that was called Ad Scam. The money was then kicked back to the same Liberal Party. No charges against Chrétien or other senior politicians, let alone removing them from office. For years, we've known about corruption in Quebec involving the mafia and the construction industry and the Liberal Party. But no charges against that province's biggest mayors, no suspensions, no firings. Only when the PR got so ugly did a few of them step down out of sheer humiliation. Dalton McGuinty, the Liberal Premier of Ontario, lied to voters in the last election about the cost of moving a power plant. It was $1 billion lie. He said he's got to step down because of the scandal, but only because even he couldn't brazen it out. But no judge stepped in, no lawyers forced him out. Well, the best example, the worst example actually, is the case of Attawapiskat, a town of 2,000 Indians, an Indian reserve, where tens of millions of taxpayers' dollars have been frittered away, yet the citizens live in squalor, where 3 chiefs and 18 band councillors suck the tea to the taxpayers' trough, where in the middle of their housing crisis, they approved a $100,000 Zamboni purchase for the town, even though they still haven't built a school yet. No lawsuit there. Actually, that's not quite true. There was a lawsuit. The Indian band sued to kick out a federally appointed auditor, and a judge agreed with them. So what's the difference here? Why is Joe Fontana and Jean Chrétien and Alfonso Galliano and Dalton McGuinty and the chiefs in Attawapiskat, why are they free to run their governments into the ground? And in the case of Fontana, face 4 criminal charges, yet not be forced from office? And yet, why is Rob Ford, the popular mayor of Toronto, Canada's biggest city, fired by a judge for using the wrong stationery? Well, my friends, that's the difference between being a liberal and a conservative. That's the media party in collusion with the lawyers' party. That's the revenge of Stephen Marsh against the fatties. The rich, white, liberal elites choose the mayor of Toronto. Clayton Ruby chooses the mayor of Toronto. Don't you uppity suburban immigrants get any big ideas? Look, Rob Ford isn't perfect. I don't care. He's run Toronto better than the left's hero, Naheed Nenshi, the George Smitherman of Calgary, who's jacked up Calgary's taxes and caved into the public service unions there. Now, Nenshi's fat too, of course. But you see, it's the good kind of fat. It's left-wing fat. Stephen Marsh would never attack Nenshi's fat. The Globe and Mail and the Star and the CBC would never either, because you see, Nenshi's a leftist. Rob Ford is a conservative. And that, my friends, is why Rob Ford was fired today.